Yeah, I think this week in podcasting was an example of someone securing the bag and then someone else fumbling the bag in the biggest way
Oh my
possible.
God, dude.
And guys, we have to touch on it because we're obsessed. Elliot and I literally message each other every day with updates from Reddit.
I messaged you this morning because I pulled open Spotify and the first thing I said, we're talking about Call Me Daddy. If you missed last week's podcast, you're not caught up, call her daddy. If you haven't caught up on the drama
continues and we are addicted.
Yeah, you need to catch up on it. Either watch last week's episode if you haven't already, or there's so much stuff talking about it. But TLDR, for those of you who aren't across it, long story short, two girls started a podcast where they talked about, sex and relationships. They did it as employees of Barstool Esports. It blew up, became one of the biggest things in the world. They thought they weren't getting paid enough. Barstool was like, well, you are getting paid enough and we have a contract. They stopped uploading. Negotiations happened back and forth. And long story short, the update where it's sitting at right now, which has kind of evolved. We kind of already knew it was going in this direction, I think, at the end of the last podcast. But essentially, it is now very firmly, it appears, in the position where one of the girls was like, actually, Barstool's put a great offer on the table. I'm keen. I'm going to come back. I'm going to do it. And the other girl realizes she probably should have done that and taken the Barstool deal. But now Barstool's like, yeah, nah, sorry. You missed out. Like, we're going with her. We're just going to, it was a duo podcast. And it looks like, so basically what I sent Grace this morning is I was like writing in and I was like putting on an episode of it and I pulled it up. And now their display picture, it used to be a picture of like the two of them doing the whole like blonde bimbo like look from their own description. That no, that's what they called it. There's an episode where they're like, they literally make us look like blonde bimbos in it. But it was like, that was like the look they were going for. And now it's just like one of the girls, literally cut from two. Now the photo is just like one of the girls smiling at the camera. And you're like,
this drama, I am so unashamedly invested because I just think it's such a good example of something that is honestly an all too common scenario in media and entertainment. I think people would be surprised to know that if you could summarize in this into one line, which you basically just did, it was like, I feel like I've grown. I feel like my talent doesn't reflect my worth. The company says, look, this is why we signed a contract. And it's a tale as old as time. This happens all the time. It's very common, but rarely does it play out in such a public manner. And I think basically the update since last week is that Sophia, the girl that has massively fumbled the bag, came out with like a 2-minute, very choppy Instagram story, basically saying, you don't understand the whole story. I wish I could do it, but I can't do it now under these terms. Yeah. Honestly, it was pretty shitty.
It was like
it was about as bad as it gets,
dude.
And I think it was like definitely. Sorry, let me just finish my thought. But I think it was definitely a highlight for me that when creators fuck up or have the need to apologize for something, I think the most important thing is making sure that when you do your apology video, you're not coming off in a worse light than before you did the apology video.
Yeah.
And there are so many examples of this. This is an example where she came off worse after than she did going into it because it came off as not genuine. It came off as elusive, like she wasn't giving the whole picture. And it came off as like not really saying anything at all. I think the example would be like Logan Paul with the incident, the first apology video he did. People hated the first apology video that James Charles did after the whole James Charles Tati thing was really bad. And then they corrected themselves, both Logan and James.
Yeah.
Sophia so far hasn't said anything else because 2 days after that, Alex, the other girl who looks to be now doing the podcast alone, came out with a 35-minute YouTube video basically laying down the facts.
Every detail.
And this video, would you say, Elliot, I thought it was really good. I thought it was
she nailed it. The problem is
she absolutely nailed it.
Yeah, I totally forget the name, but girl that got cut out when she did her video,
Sophia.
Sophia was very like 3 minutes. She was like, look guys, you don't have the whole story, but also I'm not going to say it, but the deal isn't good, but I would still want to do the podcast if we can. The other girl came out, she was like, day one, this is what happened from day one when we started the podcast to when it started doing well, to the first meeting I had, to this contract renegotiation, to this meeting, this call, this walk back I had. And this is exactly, she went into every bit of detail about every conversation, every bit. And it was just like, okay, cool. That's the story. Like, if you were the person to come out and be like,
came off genuine.
Yeah.
It came off that her feelings were authentic.
Yeah.
And it came off really, really believable. Small note as well, which I think is worth talking about, because I think it's really interesting always to look at the way that people present themselves in these videos. Sophia came out kind of done up really nicely with a lot of makeup. Her hair was done. And Alex, the second one, came out doing it in a hoodie. I think she was wearing makeup but minimal. And I just think it came off as less performative. And I think that's really interesting as well, just as a point, because I often think you find that when people do these apology videos, they do try to do it in a way that comes off as very raw and unscripted.
Yeah, and that's always the best way to do it. But I think that, the super interesting thing is that, so Alex, obviously now, podcast is going ahead. It sounds like she's going to get a nice fat contract. She'll have the IP, 75% of it in a year, and she's probably going to do incredibly well from this deal. Ultimately, everything that's gone down has been great marketing for the podcast. It'll probably come back to more viewers than ever. It'll be interesting to see if the one person dynamic will lead to any kind of like fall off. Like, I don't know how it seems essential when you listen to it now, but she's a more than capable person.
I think she was the main player.
Yeah, she was the main player.
I think she was the main player the whole time.
Yeah.
And I think like the main lesson for me in this, oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, well, I just wanted to say, like, this is what's really stuck in my mind. I just can't I can't stop replaying in my brain how screwed Sophia is, because in her mind, the way this was going to play out was very simple. It was either A, renegotiate, get a bunch of money, keep doing the podcast together, or worst case scenario was that they wouldn't be able to get Barstool to like give them everything under the sun, and they would literally walk away from Barstool and start a new podcast with the two of them that they call Me Mummy or something. I don't know. But like the same, the people
another
know,
name.
The viewers know that it's the same podcast under a different name, and they can just keep going along with their own IP. This is now worked out in a way where Call Me Daddy is going ahead. The core fan base is going to stay with them. And then there is a scenario where you could be like, okay, well, she could start her own spin-off podcast and that could become big. But here's the thing. No one likes her now, because she's come off as the bad person in all of this. She's come off as the person who was greedy, wasn't being reasonable. Like, if people are siding with a company, Barstool, over a creator that they were a fan of, that creator must have messed up pretty bad.
Yeah.
So, like, people are going to be like, oh, cool, you started a new podcast? Don't care. Don't like you anymore. And these podcasts are all about relatability. As soon as she looked at all like a snake, it's like, people don't want to hear like, fun relationship advice from someone they don't like. They want to hear that from someone who's relatable, like someone they want to be friends with. Like,
the feedback from the audience came that they felt betrayed.
Yeah.
And that is a really bad feeling or relationship to have with your audience. I think it's really, really important to foster that. And I think Elliot and I could go into so much about the importance of relatability as a creator. And we want to actually do a full episode on that, because there is way too much to sort of delve into there to do it justice. But for me, I think the biggest thing to come out of this was that they mastered the art of it's all content. It's all content. Their biggest problem that Barstool had was the fact that this show had been off the air for 6 weeks and they weren't able to monetize it, sell ads against it, build an audience for it. And suddenly, within the span of 8 days, they have created more talk than they ever could have, keeping their contract negotiations silent. Dave Portnoy, the president of Barstool, far out, that man has balls, by my French. But like, he's got guts coming out with half the shit he puts on Twitter and Instagram.
I feel like if I was worth 100 million, I'd have some pretty big balls as well.